Aisha, the beautiful young bride, and Kareem, her wealthy husband, seemed destined for a perfect life in Dubai's glittering world of luxury. But behind the glamour, a forbidden affair with his uncle Tariq would ignite a chain of betrayal, obsession, and murder that shocked everyone who thought they knew them. The wedding was unlike anything most people had ever seen. Guests flew in from across the world to witness the union of Kareem, a wealthy businessman known for his ambition and charm, and Aisha, a young woman admired for her beauty and grace. The ceremony took place in a grand hotel overlooking the glittering skyline of Dubai. Chandeliers bathed the ballroom in golden light, while tables overflowed with roses, exotic delicacies, and endless champagne. Musicians played softly as the couple made their entrance, and for a moment, the scene looked like the perfect picture of happiness. Cameras flashed, capturing smiles that seemed genuine, capturing vows that promised forever. For Aisha, the day felt like a dream, but also a cage. She barely knew Kareem beyond the stories told about his wealth and reputation. Their families had arranged the match, and though he was polite and attentive, she felt more like a prized possession than a cherished partner. Still, she smiled for the crowd, held his hand for the photographs, and played her role as the bride everyone expected her to be. Kareem's family filled the room with their presence. Among them stood his uncle Tariq, a man who carried himself with quiet confidence. Unlike the younger men who drank and laughed loudly, Tariq watched the festivities with a calm detachment. His sharp eyes noticed everything, and for reasons Aisha couldn't explain, she felt those eyes linger on her longer than they should have. It was fleeting, almost invisible to others, but enough to send a strange shiver through her. That night, as fireworks lit up the Dubai sky, Aisha and Kareem began their married life. To the outside world, it was the start of a fairy tale. In reality, it was the beginning of a story that would unravel in ways no one could imagine. At first, the connection between Aisha and Tariq seemed harmless. They exchanged polite words at family dinners, shared brief smiles at gatherings, and occasionally discussed small matters when Kareem was too busy with work to notice. Tariq was older, with streaks of silver in his hair and a way of speaking that commanded attention. He had lived through more, traveled widely, and carried himself with the calm authority of someone who had nothing left to prove. To Aisha, who often felt suffocated by her new role as Kareem's wife, Tariq represented something unfamiliar: freedom. Their conversations grew longer each time they met. Tariq asked about her interests and dreams in a way Kareem never had. He noticed her silences and the way her smile sometimes faltered when the crowd wasn't watching. Slowly, a dangerous intimacy began to form. It started with subtle gestures, a hand brushing against hers when passing a glass, a compliment whispered low enough that no one else could hear, a lingering glance across the room. Each moment seemed small, but together they built a bond that was impossible to ignore. Soon, Aisha found herself waiting for the next encounter, searching for him in crowded rooms, and inventing excuses to be near him. Tariq, despite knowing the risk, encouraged the closeness. The thrill of secrecy intoxicated them both. Meetings that once happened only during family events shifted into carefully planned rendezvous in quiet corners of Dubai's glittering city. What they shared was not love in the pure sense, but a mixture of passion, danger, and the desire for something forbidden. Neither wanted to admit the truth. They were walking on a thin line, one that could destroy everything if exposed. Yet the temptation was stronger than reason, and both chose to continue. Kareem had always considered himself a man in control. His business thrived because of his ability to read people, notice small details, and never take anything at face value. At first, he dismissed the changes in Aisha as natural adjustments to married life. She was young, new to the family, and perhaps overwhelmed by the responsibilities that came with being his wife. But as weeks passed, the explanations no longer satisfied him. Her late-night phone calls, her sudden need for privacy, and her growing distance during family gatherings could not be ignored. He began watching her more closely. Small details disturbed him. The way her phone seemed to vanish when he entered the room, the faint traces of perfume lingering when she returned from errands, and the distracted way she responded to his questions. The more he observed, the more convinced he became that something was very wrong. Still, Kareem had no clear evidence, only an unsettling feeling that gnawed at him in silence. Whispers soon reached his ears. A family friend hinted that Aisha seemed unusually close to someone in the household. Servants, though careful, let slip remarks about her secretive outings. Kareem's suspicions deepened, but what unsettled him most was a pattern he couldn't ignore. Many of these moments coincided with the presence of his Uncle Tariq. The thought was unthinkable, almost insulting, yet it lingered in his mind. Kareem grew colder at home, hiding his anger behind silence. He worked longer hours but found no peace, returning each night with the same gnawing suspicion. What once was a home filled with laughter now felt like a stage where Aisha performed carefully rehearsed acts. He knew the truth was near, and once uncovered, it would change everything forever. Tariq's confidence grew with every passing week. What had started as fleeting encounters had now become a full-blown affair, and he no longer seemed satisfied with secrecy. He began speaking of a different future, one where Aisha would leave Kareem behind and build a life with him far from the watchful eyes of family and community. For Aisha, his words were both intoxicating and terrifying. The thought of escape stirred something inside her, yet the consequences loomed too large to ignore. She was trapped between duty and desire, torn apart by choices that carried no safe outcome. Her restlessness did not go unnoticed. Kareem's silence had hardened into something more dangerous. While he never confronted her directly, his watchful gaze followed her every move. The air at home grew heavy, filled with suspicion and unspoken accusations. Aisha tried to maintain the facade, but cracks began to show. Her laughter sounded forced, her excuses weak, her presence restless. Every day felt like a performance, and every performance drained her further. Unknown to both Aisha and Tariq, Kareem had already set his plan into motion. A private investigator had been hired, a man with no ties to the family and no reason to protect their secrets. For weeks, he followed Aisha, documenting her every move, capturing photographs that told a story more damning than words ever could. The evidence piled up, pictures of stolen embraces, secret meetings, and moments that left no room for denial. When the photographs were finally handed to Kareem, his worst fears turned into undeniable truth. Rage consumed him, not only at his wife's betrayal, but at the treachery of his own uncle. The man he once admired had destroyed his honor. In that moment, Kareem knew confrontation was inevitable, and it would not end peacefully. The night of the confrontation arrived quietly, without warning to anyone else. Kareem had arranged to meet Tariq in a luxury apartment he kept on the outskirts of Dubai, a place rarely visited and far from prying eyes. Tariq believed it was a private discussion about business, but Kareem's intentions were far darker. He had spent days replaying the photographs in his mind, each image burning deeper into his pride. For Kareem, this meeting was not about reconciliation or understanding. It was about retribution. When Tariq entered the apartment, the atmosphere was already tense. Kareem's anger, long held in silence, finally erupted. Years of loyalty and respect crumbled in seconds as the truth of betrayal hung between them. Words were exchanged in fury, and restraint vanished. The argument escalated into violence, fueled by rage and humiliation. In the struggle, Kareem lashed out, striking with a force that left Tariq fatally wounded on the polished marble floor. The betrayal had ended in blood, and there was no turning back. In the aftermath, panic set in. Kareem tried to steady himself, convincing his racing mind that he could still control the situation. He hastily staged the scene to resemble a robbery. Jewelry was scattered, a drawer was forced open, and valuable items were deliberately taken. But the effort lacked precision. The placement of objects seemed too deliberate, too unnatural. Small traces of the struggle, the broken glass, the bruises on Tariq's body, told a story that theft alone could not explain. As Kareem left the apartment that night, he believed his act of desperation might conceal the truth. Yet deep down, he sensed the cracks in his cover. The crime was not as flawless as he imagined, and soon, the carefully constructed facade would begin to unravel. The discovery of Tariq's body sent shockwaves through the family. News spread quickly, and what was first reported as a robbery gone wrong soon began to raise questions. Dubai police moved swiftly, sealing the apartment and collecting evidence with meticulous care. At first glance, the crime scene seemed convincing, but the investigators noticed inconsistencies. The valuables that were missing were high in worth, yet less expensive items had been left untouched. The drawers looked forced, but not in the hurried manner of a true thief. Something about the scene felt staged. Security cameras provided the first major lead. Footage revealed that Tarek had entered the apartment building that evening, and only one other person was recorded arriving shortly after, Kareem. Hours later, Kareem was seen leaving alone. The timeline was damning, but the investigators needed more. Phone records added another layer of suspicion, showing heated exchanges between Kareem and Tarek in the days leading up to the murder. The tone of their messages suggested deep conflict, but the content remained cryptic. The most decisive evidence came from the private investigator. When approached by authorities, he revealed the photographs he had taken for Kareem. The images of Tarek and Aisha together painted a devastating picture of betrayal and motive. Presented with this, Aisha admitted to the affair, but insisted she had no part in Tarek's death. She described her relationship with him as reckless, but denied knowing about the meeting that ended his life. Kareem's alibi began to collapse under the weight of evidence. His attempts to explain the inconsistencies only deepened suspicion. The staged robbery, once his shield, had become his greatest weakness. Piece by piece, the truth emerged, and Kareem found himself cornered by the very details he thought would protect him. The trial drew immense public attention, its scandalous details gripping Dubai's community and beyond. Courtrooms filled with journalists, distant relatives, and curious onlookers, all eager to hear how a wedding that once symbolized wealth and prestige had devolved into betrayal and bloodshed. The prosecution painted a clear picture of motive: Kareem's rage at the affair, his shame at being humiliated by both his wife and his uncle, and his decision to confront Tarek in secret. Photographs, security footage, and forensic evidence were laid out one by one, leaving little room for doubt. Aisha was called to the stand, her presence fragile yet magnetic. She confessed openly to the affair, her words trembling but steady enough to confirm what many already suspected. She described how Tarek had promised a different life, how she had been swept away by passion and secrecy. Still, she insisted that murder was never part of her plan, that Kareem acted alone in his fury. Though spared legal punishment, her reputation was shattered. In the eyes of society, she was forever marked by scandal. Kareem's defense attempted to argue provocation, painting him as a man driven to a moment of uncontrollable rage by betrayal too great to endure. But the evidence of staging, the false robbery, and his attempt to mislead investigators destroyed any chance of leniency. The jury's decision was swift: guilty of murder. Kareem was sentenced to life in prison, his empire crumbling as his name became synonymous with disgrace. The aftermath left scars that no sentence could heal. Tarek's death fractured the family beyond repair. Aisha lived under a cloud of shame, and Kareem lost everything he once valued. What began as a wedding of promise ended as a cautionary tale, a dark reminder of how secrets and obsession can lead only to tragedy.